The first modern board game probably isn't what you think it is. It's much older than Monopoly or Risk or Candyland, and for such an ancient game, it's packed with action, daring escapes, breathless races,
fencing, fighting, torture, revenge.
The Game of the Goose, this time on the gaming bench. To play, first you need a Game of the Goose board. I printed this board from my own block carving. I have a video that shows the entire process. I'll link that down below. Traditionally, the spaces on the board are numbered 1 to 63, with 1 on the outside of the track that spirals into the center. There are usually 6 special action spaces and 13 goose spaces, which also give you a special action. Playing pieces can be anything, as long as each player's piece is distinct. In my case, I'm using different colored glass beads. But coins, pawns, or really anything will work. Modern versions of the game often have goose-shaped playing pieces, but there's no evidence that this was ever done in the medieval period. Movement is decided by throwing 2 6-sided dice. Any number of people can play, but more than 10 and things will be pretty crowded. The Game of the Goose is a race game, with the goal of being the first to the center space, number 63. Determine a player to start, and that person rolls. Players throw the dice in turn, moving their piece forward by the number they rolled, taking the action indicated if they land on a special space, or otherwise just waiting for their next turn on a blank space. No 2 players can occupy the same space at the same time. If a player lands on another player, their pieces swap places. If a player lands on a goose space, they get to move forward again by the number that got them there in the first place. So, if I roll a 5 and land on a goose, I automatically move forward by another 5 spaces. If I land on a special space, I have to take the action dictated by that space. If I land on a goose again, I move forward another number of spaces, and so on and so on. There are 6 special action spaces. Space number 6 is the bridge. Players landing there move forward to space number 12. Space 19 is the hotel or the inn. Land there and miss 1 turn. Space 31 is the well. A player landing there must remain stuck in the well until another player lands on that space and pulls them out. Then the rescuing player is stuck there until somebody else lands there to pull them out. Space 42 is the maze. Land there and move back to space 39. Space 52 is the prison. Like the well, players are stuck there until somebody else lands on the space to take their place. Space number 58 is death. Land there and start the game over at space number 1. To win, a player has to land on space 63 with an exact roll. If a player rolls in excess of what they need, they have to move backwards by the number of the overthrow. If the player lands on a goose when they're moving backwards, they move backwards again by the amount of the original roll. There's a special rule that only applies on your very first roll of the game. As there is a goose every 9 spaces, an opening roll of 9 would land the player on a goose, so they'd move ahead 9, land on another goose, and so on until they win the game. So if a player on their first turn only throws a 9 with a 6 on one die and a 3 on the other, they move forward to space number 26. If they roll a 9 with a 4 and a 5, they move forward to space number 53. I'm not sure this fixes the game, as you could still be within 10 spaces of winning just by rolling a 9 to start. There are countless variations on the rules, as well as house rules, regional variations, and different themes. The most popular variation was, of course, gambling. When money was on the line, each player would ante their stake in the center of the board. Any hazard space, even a positive one like the bridge, requires the player to put in another stake. Landing on another player and swapping places requires both players to put in. The final pot is won either by the first player to reach number 63, or alternatively, the first player gets half the pot and the second and third players split the rest. Another variation I recommend is eliminating the rules for the well and the prison. If you're trailing and land in either of these spots, you may very well have to sit there and do nothing for the entire game. Instead, consider making these spaces inflict a different penalty. Some rules from history include missing a turn, missing 2 turns, missing turns until another player passes you by, or if you're playing for money, having to put in additional stakes to be set free. Personally, I think the Game of the Goose is fine. It's certainly playable and even fun with the right group of people, and admittedly, it is more engaging with a big pile of money in the center, but it's not the first game I'd pull off the shelf. But then again, what do I know? You can't argue with its popularity. Originally invented in the 15th century, it's continued to be played with rules barely altered until modern day. But my real question is this: why was a game that was, let's be honest, a rather dull race to the center so incredibly popular for so long? And why is it considered the ancestor of all modern board games? The game of the goose was first played in Italy in the 15th century. However, its creator most likely didn't invent it from scratch, since race games had already been around for millennia. Even race games with a spiral track were nothing new. The ancient Egyptian game of Maigheach has a very similar track, with players racing to the center. There were trade routes between Egypt and Italy at the time, so it's reasonable to think that the game of the goose evolved from these earlier, simpler spiral race games. But interestingly, no missing link games have ever been discovered, so this is all speculation. What distinguishes Goose from other race games is the unique combination of 63 squares, 6 specific hazards on the board, and of course, the 13 lucky goose spaces. More on that later. The earliest written mention of the game is from a 1480 book of sermons by Dominican friar Gabriel del Barletta. He writes, "If anyone comes to my house in this season, I have prepared several games. If he wishes to play at tarot, there are tarot cards in the house. If at backgammon, I have several boards. For goose, I have both large and small dice." While this passage sounds welcoming, Barletta is actually condemning these games. By casually conveying how common they were, especially around celebration days, he's illustrating how even the virtuous can fall into wickedness by playing these seemingly innocuous games. Also, the large dice were for older players with failing eyesight, proving that you're never too old to fall victim to sin. The oldest surviving goose game is this board, made from ebony, ivory, horn, and gold wire. It's on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I was lucky enough to see it in person last year, and it really is an amazing piece of art. It's designed with Indian motifs, but with Western numbers. It reflects the traditional layout of the game, except that it's missing 2 hazards, the bridge and the inn. On the opposite side is an 8x8 checkered board. So few examples of early goose boards remain because they were most often printed on paper. By the 15th century, Italy was producing a wide range of printed materials, using woodblock printing and early movable type. But by the end of that century, Italian artists discovered intaglio printing, also called copperplate engraving. This allowed for delicate lines and lavish illustrations that were often colored by hand. Florence became a center for intaglio printing, producing tens of thousands of art prints. It's in this environment that the game of the goose was created, or as the Italians would call it, Gioco dell'Orca. The game was popular throughout Florence, including in the court of Francesco de' Medici, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. A famous, and perhaps apocryphal, story relates how Francisco gifted a copy of the game of the goose to the King of Spain, Philip II, sometime around 1580. This, incidentally, is why the game is often called the Royal Game of the Goose. While we don't know if Medici really sent the game to Spain, we do know for a fact that however the game reached Spain, it became just as popular as it was in Italy. A letter from King Philip's court jester, a man named Grunfeld, dated August 24th, 1585, mentions the game by name. "Accursed be your servant Luis de Vara, who brought along a devilish game called Gioco dell'Orca, played with 2 dice. It is a game played in Tuscany, and God grant he who made it may burn, for to the prince I have lost 40 scudi." King Philip of Spain was not known to be a gambler or game player, so why then did Francesco de' Medici think his gift would be well received? Well, because, like Francesco himself, Philip had a keen interest in numerology and symbolism, and the game of the goose is chock full of both. To fully appreciate the symbolism in the game of the goose, you have to understand that at this time in Florence, the philosophy/movement of Christian Kabbalah had established a firm foothold in the Medici court. Kabbalah was, to put it very simplistically, the attempt to fit Christian doctrines into traditional Jewish mysticism. Suddenly, hidden messages and significant numerical combinations could be found nearly everywhere. And remember, the game of the goose was created in Florence. Most likely. So the goose board having 63 squares is no quirk or coincidence. The number 63 was deeply significant to medieval philosophers, who referred to it as the Grand Climacteric. Essentially, this refers to a belief that a significant milestone is passed for every 7 years of a person's life, culminating in the 63rd year. 17th century author Sir Thomas Browne summarized it like this: "The numbers 7 and 9, which multiplied into themselves do make up 63, commonly esteemed the great climatical of our lives. For the days of men are usually cast up by septenaries, and every 7th year conceived to carry some altering character with it, either in the temper of body, mind, or both. The year of 63 is considered to carry with it the most considerable fatality." However, surpassing your 63rd birthday meant you could enjoy the peace and wisdom that came with this milestone. Therefore, the track of the game of the goose wasn't just a cosmically significant number, it was reflective of our journey through life as humans. There are many obstacles along the way, some of which are represented in the game of the goose. The bridge represents a rite of passage, perhaps from youth to adulthood. The inn represents earthly temptations and distractions. The well demonstrates the need for help from others. The prison shows the cost of wickedness. The labyrinth symbolizes error. And death is not death of the body, but rather the death of the soul, requiring a fresh start. Even the placement of the lucky goose squares are meaningful. Each goose is exactly 9 squares away from the next one. 9 was considered a holy number, it being 3, the symbol of the Trinity, multiplied by itself. So 3 by 3 becomes the Trinity of Trinities. Not all of the elements of the game of the goose fit neatly into numerology or Christian Kabbalah teachings. The traditional spaces for the hazard, the bridge on space 6 or the inn on space 19, for example, don't appear to map to any significant numbers. Finally, you can't study the game of the goose without asking, why geese? On the surface level, a goose is food, and a well-fed family in this period was lucky indeed. But using the goose just as a representation of plenty feels unsatisfying, especially for a game so drenched in symbolism. In his excellent paper, The Medieval Game of the Goose, Philosophy, Numerology, and Symbolism, board game historian Adrian Saville suggests another option. He reminds us that the pelican is a prevalent Christian symbol of self-sacrifice and divine love. I know many of you are familiar with the Pelican in her piety, in which a pelican nourishes her young with the blood of her own breast when no other food is available. In this context, a pelican would make a lot of sense in the game. But a pelican looks nothing like a goose, right? Maybe not. The stylized iconography of the medieval period generally did not depict the pelican with the large pouch we associate with it today. Rather, pelicans were illustrated with a shorter beak that, well, made them look a lot like geese. Now, I'm not saying this is the answer, and I don't think Saville is either. It's a very neat theory, but one that's generally not supported by the evidence on extant boards. I mean, it's not like if an artisan accidentally misspelled pelican as goose when carving the title of the game into a wood block. But maybe, just maybe, the first time the inventor of the game showed off his handiwork, his friend said, "Hey, nice goose," and he just rolled with it. In the early 1500s, the printing industry in Italy had expanded to Venice, which became the largest printing center in all of Europe. Unlike northern countries that largely relied on autonomous woodblock printing to illustrate books, Italy, fueled by its wealthy patrons, focused on luscious art prints made by renowned artists or schools of artists. Beautifully illustrated Game of the Goose boards were part of this output. These relatively inexpensive prints helped the game travel throughout Europe, its popularity growing as it expanded. Other artisans began to customize the game to make it more appealing to their customers. Italian historian Pietro Chiara writes, "It is clear that intelligent men, after the first invention of something, will by adding to or modifying the basic idea, make other inventions. We know that this occurred for the game of the goose in the time of our fathers. This game was invented at Florence. When it was published in Spain, it gave occasion to certain intelligent spirits to invent other games, each a little different from the original." This spread and evolution of the game is key to why it is often called the first modern board game. But so this doesn't become overly long, I think I'll pick up that thread in my next video. Instead, let's talk strategy. So, how do you win the game of the goose? Roll lucky. That's all you can do. Because for all its historical importance and impact, it really is just a mindless roll and move game. There's no strategy, other than try to avoid hazards and land on geese, but even then you're completely at the mercy of the dice. And that's part one. Next week I'll talk about how the traditional form of the game of the goose evolved into a wide range of similar but thematically different games, securing its place as the first modern board game. Once again, this board is printed from a linoleum block I carved. I've linked my video in the description that shows the whole process. And if this is the kind of content you enjoy, please like and subscribe, and tell your friends. Then tell them to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Gaming Bench.